Morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Wherever you are in time and space, welcome to Just the Word TV and thank you for joining our daily morning devotion. This channel is built on one mission to help you hear what God actually said, not tradition, just the Word. So, we are continually moving forward, studying what it means to be a spiritual Baptist, making sure that we're using biblical foundation as our foundation. And we are basically moving through the timeline in the Old Testament, and now we are at the last book of the Old Testament. And it was weird as I was like going through the research for it because what I realized is that at this point in time, right, we're going to be looking at the book of Malachi. We're going to be looking at Malachi himself. And by the time Malachi is on the scene, things are basically rebuilt. Things are basically put back in order. We talked about Ezra, where the heart of the people was worked on, right, from the inside out. Then, because of a well developed heart in God, we moved on and went into Nehemiah, where the physical expression of that heart came out through the building of the walls. Now, you would think, you know, all's well and good, continue moving forward. You know, but inwardly, I began to see that Malachi had to begin to speak to these people again. Their worship had basically grown careless. Malachi shows us that God isn't after like any type of rituals or structures. He wants loyalty of the heart. It feels like it's like a constant reminding, or is a constant. I don't know. It's weird. It's the same thing over and over and over again. Why is it that Israel or us, we fall into the same type of patterns over and over and over again? Why is it that even after God has provided, even after God has put us through the refinement sometimes, why is it that we always go back? But that is just a question for another, another series, another video. Just something that came to my mind as I was reading and as I was doing it. But let's continue with today's case study, and we're going to go through with the historical context first. So the timeline is about 430 BC. It has been decades since men like Ezra and Nehemiah led the heroic efforts to rebuild Jerusalem. The temple is standing. The protective walls are complete. The city is secure. On the surface, it looks like a success story, a comeback for the ages. But underneath the new construction, a spiritual rot had set in. The generation that wept with joy at the sight of the new temple was gone. Their children and grandchildren had grown up with it. The sacrifices, the priesthood, the law, it all became routine. Familiarity bred contempt. Malachi, whose name means my messenger, is God's final prophetic voice before 400 years of silence. He arrives on the scene to hold up a mirror to the people's heart, and the reflection isn't pretty. He calls out specific problems. First, the priests, who were supposed to be spiritual leaders, were offering defective, blemished animals of sacrifice. The blind, the lame, the sick, and touched. In Malachi chapter 1, verses 8, God asked them a sarcastic question. Try offering that to your governor. Would he be pleased with you? The people were robbing God by withholding their tithes and offering. They were giving God their leftovers, if they gave anything at all. Their covenant relationships were a mess. Men were faithless to their wives of their youth, creating a culture of divorce and heartbreak that God hated. Worst of all, they had become cynical. They openly questioned God's love, asking, how have you loved us? And they doubted his justice, complaining that evil people seemed to prosper. The walls stood tall, but their worship fell flat. This is the backdrop for God's final message through Malachi, a message that we can understand through our four pillars. So, looking at pillar number one, a word baptized heart. It all starts with the word. Before God delivers a single critique, he reminds them of his foundational truth. The very first thing he says in Malachi chapter 1, verse 2 is, I have loved you. This is the starting point for everything. His correction isn't the anger of a tyrant, it is the heartbreak of a loving father. But the people's response is cold and detached. How have you loved us? They have forgotten their own story. They have forgotten the Exodus, the Promised Land, the protection, and the recent restoration. Their hearts were so callous that God's love felt like a distant theory, not a present reality. The problem, Malachi points out, was a failure of the word. The priests were supposed to be the guardians of the truth. Malachi chapter 2, verse 7 says, "For the lips of a priest should guard knowledge, and people should seek instruction from his mouth. But they had failed. They offered cheap grace and turned a blind eye to sin, causing many to stumble." God's solution wasn't a new building program. It was a simple, powerful call back to his word. In Malachi chapter 3, verse 7, he says, "Return to me, and I will return to you." A word baptized heart is one that never forgets God's love and constantly returns to his truth as its source of life. Next, looking at pillar number 2, spirit and fire refinement. When the people complained that serving God was felt pointless, God responded with a promise of purification. This is the second pillar, spirit and fire refinement. In Malachi chapter 3, verses 13 to 15, the people grumble. They say, "It is vain to serve God. What is the profit of our keeping his charge? Now we call the arrogant blessed. Evildoers not only prosper, but they put God to the test and they escape." They were looking around, comparing their lives to others, and concluding that faithfulness didn't pay. God's answer is stunning. His promises to come, but not as a cozy comforter. Malachi chapter 3 verses 2 to 3 says, "But who can endure the day of his coming? And who can stand when he appears? For he is like a refiner's fire and a fuller's soap. He will sit as a refiner and purifier of silver, and he will purify the sons of Levi and refine them like silver and gold." A refiner's fire burns away impurities, the dross, to leave only pure metal. Fuller's soap was a harsh substance used to violently scrub and bleach cloth. This is not a gentle image. God is saying, "You want to see my justice? I will bring a fire that burns away everything that is fake, half-hearted, and impure in your worship." So, in this sense, the people were looking at other people doing evil and doing wrongdoings, right? But they have to understand that God's fire is something that is meant for everyone. So if it seems that you are needed for some type of refinement, the fire is not just going to hit the people who you think need refinement. It is also going to hit you. As a matter of fact, we are all in needing of refinement. So whenever that fire of God comes down, it's not just for the person who you think is doing wrong. It's for not only that person, but for also for you, because you may think that person is doing wrong, right? And we're all guilty of this. But we are all in need of some type of refinement. We all have weaknesses we need to work on. This is why we have to make sure that we enable grace, because we all have weaknesses we need to work on. Enable grace with boundaries, right? Um, as I said before, if you are giving grace to people, you are giving grace to others. I'll put it to you this way: whenever I don't receive the grace that I think I should receive in a particular situation, maybe God has given me the grace, but mankind won't give me the grace. I make sure to give double the grace to the next person or whoever it might be that I might meet next, because what it understands, and I do that with a boundary. I do that with boundaries. What I mean by that is, although I understand and I forgive you for the mistake that you have made, I also need to keep and be very aware of you, due to the fact that, okay, this is revealing something about your character and it's allowing me to understand something about you. So now I have to practice discernment in terms of dealing with you. Okay, I understand that this is who you are. I love you still as a person, but I have to make sure that I don't do X, Y, and Z around you. I have to make sure that I don't do A, B, C with you. You get what I'm saying? So let's continue. So refinement exposes our motives. It forces us to ask, am I serving God for what I can get, or only because he is worthy? Am I offering true worship or just empty ritual? The fire separates genuine devotion from a performance meant to impress others. Looking at pillar 3, the priority of interchange. Malachi makes it painfully clear that God cares more about what happens in our homes and hearts than what happens in the temple. This is the priority of interchange. Rebuilding outside means nothing if the inside is neglected. He targets two very practical areas: marriage and money. First, marriage. Malachi chapter 2, 13 through 16, he describes the men weeping at the altar, wondering why God isn't accepting their offerings. God's response is blunt. It's because you have been unfaithful to your wives. You have broken the covenant you have made before me. Your public worship is a lie because your private life is a betrayal. God is essentially saying, don't bring me your sacrifices while you're breaking the hearts of the people I've joined you to. Inner change starts with loyalty in our closest relationships. Second, money. In Malachi chapter 3, verse 8, God accuses them of robbery. Will a man rob God? Yet you are robbing me. But you say, how have we robbed you? In your tithes and contributed and your contributions. Their giving their giving revealed their heart. They weren't giving God their first and their best. They were giving him their leftovers. They saw the tithe not as an act of worship and trust, but as a tax to be avoided. This half-hearted giving was just a symptom of a half-hearted life. And as I explained before, tithes is not about who you're paying the money to. Remember, tithes is a financial development system God has developed or God has created for mankind, so that as you are contributing and as you are participating in tithe giving, you are developing your financial acumen, you are developing your financial discipline, you are developing yourself financially, so that when you look at your money, you're not looking at your money as something as, well, how can I spend it today? You look at it as how can I, what can I do to make sure to give God his cut first. Make sure to give God what's his first, so I can now continue moving forward and stewarding properly what God has given me. Remember, tithes are it's a development process. It's a process to help you grow financially in your discernment, grow financially in your development in terms of how you look at your money and the perspective and how you view your money. So again, outward rituals are meaningless if the inner life, our character, our integrity, our generosity isn't aligned with God's heart. So, pillar 4, the active baptizer. So even in this stern rebuke, Malachi doesn't end on a note of condemnation. He points forward. This is the fourth pillar, the active baptizer. God is always moving, always preparing his people for what's next. In Malachi chapter 3, verse 1, God promises, behold, I send my messenger, and he will prepare the way before me. This is a prophecy of John the Baptist, who would come to prepare Israel for the arrival of the Messiah. Then, in the very last verses of the Old Testament, Malachi chapter 4, verse 5 and 6, God gives another promise. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes, and he will turn the hearts of fathers to their children, and the hearts of children to their fathers. Malachi's warnings are not a dead end. They are a runway. He is calling Israel to get their hearts right because someone is coming. God is about to act in history in the most profound way imaginable. This pillar reminds us that God is always active, urging us to stay faithful and ready for his next move. So, I mentioned that I thought that it was pretty weird that the Israelites basically slipped right back into, basically doing what they were doing beforehand. They went through exile, went through all of this pain and suffering just to just go back into it. And I got some, I guess, insights from it, right? So first and foremost, external fixes don't change internal roots. They rebuilt the temple, but they didn't renew their hearts. They secured the city, but they didn't guard their devotion. We can have all the outward structures of faith, church attendance, daily devotionals, religious activity, but if the root of our heart isn't continually surrendered to God, we will wither. The wall stood tall, but their worship fell flat. Second, familiarity breeds contempt. What was once a precious gift, the temple, the presence of God, the sacrificial system, have become a boring routine. In Malachi chapter 1, verse 13, they say, what a weariness this is, and they sniff at the altar in disgust. Familiarity with God's house can make us forget God's heart. We can get so used to grace that we treat it as cheap. Remember what I said before? We can't use grace as something, just to cover up every time we make a mistake. Grace is something that is going to allow us to give us the mental space to look at our mistake and to learn from it and make sure that we don't have to fall over or trip over this mistake again. 3, forgetting God's love is the first step to disobedience. Their spiritual decay started with one cynical question: how have you loved us? Once they began to doubt God's fundamental goodness and love for them, every command felt like a burden and every act of worship felt pointless. Finally, humans naturally drift without intentional renewal. This is the story of the Bible. From Exodus to Judges to the Kings, the cycle repeats. God rescues, the people are grateful for a season, and then they slowly drift back into their old ways. Structures don't save us. Continual surrender does. Faith is not a one-time decision, but a daily return. And it makes me look at this, that human nature seems to be very like mean reverting. And I'm saying that because I'm studying stochastic calculus right now for various reasons. But what it seems like from the process, the cycle that God's people goes through, it's mean reverting. You start out maybe worshiping God, right? Worshiping God, worshiping God, worshiping God, and then you get distracted for some reason, and then you end up in disobedience, and then you go through something like the Babylonian, like a Babylonian exile, and you're going through it, you're going through it, you're going through it, and then you kind of just start to find your faith again. You kind of go back up again, go back up again, go back up again, and then after a while, it's the same thing. You crash, and then it's back up again. Crash. So it's a very weird, I guess, thing to look at, or just to imagine that we have to make sure, in order to escape that type of mean reverting behavior, we have to make sure that we're continuously in the Word of God. There's no way that we're going to make sure. There's no way that we're going to, you know, instill different things of God if we're not in the Word. And if it is that human nature is this constant mean reverting thing where life is just going to be up and it's going to be down, but it's going to go right back up and then going right back down, it's very important that we have something that is going to keep us stable in all that, right? I don't know if anyone can see that kind of like wave motion where it's a up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. I wish I had some type of graphics to show you, but we have to make sure that in the middle of that, right, that we're not trying to follow that particular trend. We're making sure we're cutting in between all of that. We're cutting in between all of that noise, just to make sure that we're still focusing on God. I'll hopefully I can explain stochastic calculus, because I did find some parallels between God's word and stochastic calculus, and how we can possibly use stochastic calculus, if you guys would like to study it, to enhance our understanding of the Bible, enhance our understanding of God Himself. So, outcome and legacy. Malachi closes the Old Testament with this urgent call to return to God wholeheartedly. His message is a powerful warning against going through the motions. He serves as the conscience of Israel, reminding them that their covenant with God is not a contract of convenience, but a relationship of loyalty. His legacy is crystal clear and echoes through the centuries to us today. Malachi reminds us, God doesn't want leftovers, He wants loyalty. So, I hope that today's devotion was able to give you a new perspective, a different insight, and some more understanding and more insight in terms of what Malachi was doing, the mean reverting nature of human nature itself, and understanding that even after God has delivered you, even after God has blessed you, like I want you guys to picture this. This whole from Ezra, or let's go a little bit further than that. That Babylonian exile to Ezra to Nehemiah to Malachi is a whole understanding, a whole, maybe think about it like, maybe what if you're waiting for a breakthrough, right? You're waiting for a breakthrough and you're praying to God, you're remaining faithful, praying to God. And you get the breakthrough, and now while you're in the breakthrough, you're forgetting God. This is the same thing that Malachi was basically telling the people of Israel at that point in time. God has given you the breakthrough. He's put you in the car. He's put you in the house. He's put you in the job. He's put you wherever you've wanted to go. He's put you in a new, brighter place, much higher. And instead of still holding on to God, you have lost your way. You have become half-hearted. Your worship has become half-heartedly. And this this is the for us to understand that no matter what God has blessed you with, no matter what God continues to bless you with, no matter what God has given you, make sure that you don't forget Him. In the midst of your blessing, do not forget God. Do not forget the man who brought you to the dance in the first place. Don't do not forget the person who brought you out of the mud. Don't forget him, because in that blessing, as great as it seems, you want to forget God in that blessing, He can, as fast as He can give it to you, He can take it away. Just for you to understand that this did not come from you, the human. It came from the person who created you. I don't want to use the word person. It came from the creator who created you, from the heavenly creator, the all powerful creator that created you. So until next time, everyone, stay grounded, stay humbled, and above all else, stay aligned with just the word. Thank you.